It was early in the morning, the kind of morning when the world still felt half asleep. The sun had just started to rise, sending soft golden light through the large glass windows of the airport. The woman stood near the check-in counter, holding her small suitcase tightly and looking at the long line ahead of her. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark of hope in them. This flight meant everything to her. It wasn't just another trip. It was her chance to attend a job interview that could finally change her life. She had been waiting for this opportunity for months. It was for a position she had dreamed of, one that could help her build a better future. She had saved money carefully just to afford the flight, cutting back on little things so she wouldn't miss this chance. As she moved slowly through the line, she whispered to herself, reminding herself not to be nervous. Everything had to go right today. The airport was already crowded. People were rushing in every direction, some pulling heavy bags, some arguing about boarding passes, and some sipping coffee like it was the only thing keeping them awake. Announcements echoed over the speakers, calling passengers to different gates. The woman checked her ticket again and smiled with relief. She had made it on time. After checking in her bag, she went through security, trying not to show how anxious she felt. When she finally reached her gate, she sat down and took a deep breath. She pulled out her small notebook where she had written questions and answers for her interview. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, rehearsing silently. Around her, people chatted loudly, but she tried to block out the noise. A few minutes later, she stood up to stretch her legs and get some water. That was when she noticed an old man sitting near the corner looking lost. He had a ticket in one hand and a small black bag on the floor beside him. He was frowning, adjusting his glasses as he squinted at the information board. His movements were slow, unsure. People walked past him without paying attention. She looked at him for a moment. He seemed to be in his late 70s, maybe even older. His hand shook slightly as he tried to read his ticket. She could tell something was wrong. Still, she hesitated. Her flight was boarding soon, and she didn't want to take any risks. She looked back toward her gate where passengers were already lining up. But something in her heart wouldn't let her walk away. She sighed softly and walked toward the old man. "Excuse me, sir," she said gently. "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" The man looked up slowly. His eyes were kind but tired. "Oh, thank you, young lady," he said, struggling to stand. "I think I'm at the wrong gate. I can't seem to find the right one." She smiled politely. "Let me see your ticket." He handed it to her with shaky hands. She looked at the details and realized his gate was far away, at the other end of the terminal. There was no way he could get there quickly on his own. "It's a bit far," she said kindly, "but I can walk with you if you'd like." He looked surprised. "Oh, you don't have to trouble yourself," he said softly. "It's no trouble," she replied, still smiling. "I have a few minutes before my flight." She picked up his bag, which felt heavier than it looked, and started walking slowly beside him. The man moved carefully, taking small steps while she made sure to stay close in case he stumbled. As they walked, he thanked her again and again. "You remind me of my granddaughter," he said with a small laugh. "She's about your age, always running around helping everyone." "That's sweet," she replied. "Does she live nearby?" He shook his head. "No, she's studying abroad. I don't get to see her much these days." They continued walking, passing rows of shops and passengers. The woman kept checking her phone for the time, trying not to panic. Each minute felt longer than the last. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave him. The old man talked about his travels, his late wife, and how he hadn't been on a plane in years. His voice was calm, and there was something warm about his presence. When they finally reached his gate, the airline staff was just about to start boarding. She handed him his bag and smiled. "You're right on time, sir," she said. He looked at her with gratitude in his eyes. "You're a blessing," he said softly. "Not many people would have stopped to help." "You've got a good heart." She felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just glad I could help," she said kindly. "You have a safe flight, all right?" He nodded and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, my dear. I won't forget your kindness." She smiled and hurried back, realizing how much time had passed. Her flight was scheduled to depart soon. She started walking faster, her suitcase bumping against her leg. The distance felt longer now, and her heart was pounding. When she finally reached her gate, her smile faded instantly. The area was empty. The boarding door was closed. She ran to the counter. "Please tell me the plane hasn't left yet," she said quickly. The attendant looked up with a sympathetic face. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The flight has already departed." Her heart sank. "No, please," she said, trying to explain. "I was helping someone who needed me. Can't you just open it for a second?" The attendant shook her head kindly. "Once the doors close, we can't reopen them. But I can book you on the next flight." She took a deep breath, fighting back frustration. "When's the next one?" "In about 6 hours," the woman at the counter said. 6 hours. That meant she would miss her interview completely. She stepped aside, trying not to cry. She didn't regret helping the old man, but she couldn't stop thinking about how everything she had worked for might be slipping away. She sat on one of the seats near the window, her mind full of noise. People walked by, laughing and talking, but she didn't hear them. She stared at the runway where the plane she was supposed to be on was already taking off. For a moment, she thought maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe she should have just ignored the old man and kept walking. But then she remembered his smile, his soft voice, the way he looked relieved when she helped him. That thought gave her a little peace. She whispered to herself, "It's okay. I did the right thing." As she sat quietly, she noticed something strange. A few airport staff members passed by and looked at her curiously, whispering to each other. She didn't understand why, but she ignored it. Maybe they had just seen her run earlier. She took out her notebook again, trying to stay calm. She didn't know that her life was already changing at that very moment. The small act of kindness that cost her a flight was about to bring her something she could never have planned for. For now, she sat alone, waiting for time to pass, unaware that the man she had helped was far more important than he seemed. She had no idea that her simple decision to stop, to care, was about to open doors she never imagined. The story of that morning wasn't about what she lost. It was about what she was about to gain. But at that moment, all she knew was the sound of planes taking off and the quiet ache in her chest, wondering why doing the right thing had to hurt so much. The woman hurried through the airport, her heart racing as she checked the time on her phone. Her flight was about to board, and she could already hear the announcement echoing through the terminal. She clutched her bag tighter and walked faster, weaving through the crowd of travelers dragging suitcases and sipping coffee. The morning rush at the airport was always the same, loud, impatient, and full of people lost in their own worlds. But her world, at that moment, was focused on one thing: making it to that flight. This trip wasn't just a vacation or a visit. It was her chance to attend an important job interview that could completely change her life. She had been working so hard for this opportunity, and now it felt like everything depended on getting there on time. Just as she turned the corner toward her gate, something caught her eye. Near one of the benches, an elderly man was struggling with his luggage. His suitcase had fallen, and his hands trembled slightly as he tried to lift it back up. People walked past him, pretending not to notice. A few even stared for a second and then looked away. She hesitated for a moment. Her flight was boarding soon. Her gate wasn't far, but helping him would mean losing a few precious minutes. She looked down at her boarding pass, then back at the old man. He looked so tired and lost. A small voice inside her whispered, "Help him." With a sigh and a gentle smile, she stepped forward. "Let me help you with that, sir," she said softly. The old man looked up, surprised but grateful. "Oh, thank you, my dear," he said, his voice trembling. She helped him lift the heavy bag and asked where he was headed. He fumbled with his ticket, pulling it out slowly from his coat pocket. His hand shook as he tried to read it. "I think I'm at the wrong gate," he said, confused. She glanced at the ticket and realized his gate was on the opposite side of the terminal. He never would have made it on his own. "It's okay," she said kindly. "Come on, I'll walk you there." They started walking slowly. The old man moved carefully, each step a small effort. She carried his bag and kept pace beside him. The airport noise faded behind them. Announcements, chatter, rolling suitcases. Everything felt slower now. The man began to talk about how he hadn't traveled in years, how things had changed so much. She listened politely, nodding and smiling even as her eyes kept glancing at the time on her phone. Every minute that passed made her chest tighten. When they finally reached his gate, the flight attendants were already beginning to close the doors. "You're just in time," she said, relieved. The old man smiled warmly. "You didn't have to help me like this," he said softly. "Most people wouldn't have stopped." She shook her head and smiled. "It's fine. I just wanted to make sure you got here safely." He reached out and held her hand for a brief second. "You have a kind heart," he said. "Thank you." She nodded quickly, told him to have a safe flight, and then turned around, almost running back toward her own gate. Her heart pounded as she ran through the terminal. The sound of her footsteps echoed as she passed stores and tired travelers. When she finally reached her gate, her stomach dropped. The doors were closed. The flight attendant standing there looked up and gave her a sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "The flight has already departed." The woman stood there, breathing heavily, trying to catch her breath and her thoughts. "Please, it just left a few minutes ago. Can't you open it?" "I really need to be on that flight," she pleaded. The attendant shook her head gently. "I wish I could, but once the doors close, we can't reopen them. I can help you rebook another flight." Her shoulders slumped. She took a deep breath, trying not to cry. "All right," she whispered. She followed the attendant to the counter, where they found the next flight, but it wasn't for several hours. Her interview was scheduled for that afternoon. By the time she arrived, it would be too late. She sat down in one of the chairs near the gate, her hands covering her face. All she could think about was how close she had been. One small act of kindness had cost her everything she'd been working for. Still, deep inside, there was no anger. Just disappointment, and a strange calm, too. She pulled out her phone and tried to call the company to explain what happened. The call went to voicemail. She left a message apologizing and saying she had missed her flight because of an emergency. She hung up and sat quietly for a while. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You missed your flight, too?" She looked up and saw the same old man standing there. He was holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a small pastry in the other. "Yes," she said, forcing a small smile. "But it's okay. I'll wait for the next one." The old man looked at her kindly. "You helped me, and because of that you missed your flight, didn't you?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "It's all right," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm sure everything happens for a reason." He smiled and sat down beside her. "That's a good way to think," he said. "Not many people see life like that anymore." They sat quietly for a while, sipping their coffee. Around them, people rushed from one gate to another, phones pressed to their ears, eyes glued to screens. But for a few moments, time seemed to slow down for the two of them. The man asked about her trip, and she told him about her interview, how important it was to her, how much she wanted that chance. He listened patiently, nodding. "I can tell you're someone who works hard," he said. "And I can also tell that you didn't help me expecting anything in return." She smiled. "No, sir. I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." He looked at her thoughtfully, almost as if he knew something she didn't. "Sometimes," he said, "the good we do comes back to us in ways we can't imagine." She didn't think much of his words at the time. She just smiled, thanked him for the coffee, and told him she hoped he had a safe flight. The old man smiled back and said, "You too, my dear. Don't worry. Everything will work out just the way it's meant to." After he left, she sat quietly, staring out at the runway. Planes took off one after another, their lights fading into the sky. She thought about how strange the morning had turned out, how a few minutes could change everything. She leaned back in her seat, closed her eyes, and told herself it would be fine. Maybe she could still explain things later. Maybe someone would understand. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her chance had slipped away. What she didn't know was that the man she helped wasn't just any passenger. Behind that gentle smile and simple clothes was someone who held more power than she could ever imagine. And soon she was about to find out that missing her flight wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far bigger than she could have ever dreamed. The woman sat quietly near the window, still thinking about how everything had gone wrong that morning. She kept staring at the planes moving outside, each one taking off while she sat there waiting for hours. Her phone battery was low and the airport noise surrounded her, people laughing, children crying, announcements echoing. But she felt lost in her own thoughts. She kept replaying the moment when she helped the old man, and then saw her gate closing right before her eyes. She tried to stay strong, but inside her heart felt heavy. She thought about the interview she had missed. It wasn't just any job. It was a position she had been preparing for, something she believed could finally help her stand on her own feet. She had dreamed about working for a company where she could make a difference. Now she felt like that dream had just slipped away. A small voice in her head tried to comfort her. "You did the right thing," she told herself quietly. "You helped someone who needed you." But still, another part of her whispered, What if it was your only chance? That thought hurt the most. After some time, she decided to get a cup of coffee and calm herself down. She stood up, stretched her legs, and walked to a nearby cafe. The smell of coffee filled the air. She ordered a cup and sat down near the window again, trying to think about what to do next. She considered calling the company again, maybe explaining the situation more clearly. But she knew it might not matter. Most companies wouldn't reschedule interviews for someone who simply missed their flight. Just as she took her first sip, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "You again?" She turned around and was surprised to see the same old man she had helped earlier. He was smiling gently, holding 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "I saw you sitting here alone," he said softly. "Thought you could use another cup." She blinked, a little shocked but also touched by his kindness. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he said, sitting down beside her. "But sometimes a warm drink helps when the world feels heavy." She smiled faintly. "That's true." They sat quietly for a few moments, sipping their coffee. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. The old man looked at her closely and said, "You missed your flight, didn't you?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I was too late. I guess I lost track of time helping you." His eyes softened with guilt. "I'm so sorry, my dear. I never meant to cause that." She shook her head quickly. "Please don't say that. It's not your fault. I chose to help you. I just wish things had worked out differently." He nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "Was it an important trip?" She smiled sadly. "Very important. I had a job interview. I've been waiting for months for this chance." He looked genuinely interested. "And what kind of job were you hoping for?" "It was for a position at a travel company," she said. "I studied hard for it. I even practiced my answers for days. It wasn't a big position, but it was a start, something I could grow from." The man listened carefully, nodding every few seconds. His gentle eyes never left her face. "You sound like someone who doesn't give up easily," he said. She laughed softly. "I try not to. Life hasn't been easy, but I always believe good things come to those who wait." "That's true," he said with a small smile. "But sometimes good things come when you least expect them." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like you know that from experience." He chuckled quietly. "I've lived long enough to see life's strange ways. Sometimes we lose something we thought we needed, only to gain something better later." She leaned back in her chair, thinking about his words. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "But right now it's hard to see the good in missing that flight." The man nodded, understanding. "I can imagine. But trust me, you did something good today. Kindness always finds its way back." They continued talking for a while. The woman found herself feeling lighter. The old man asked about her family, her hobbies, and her dreams. She told him how she grew up helping her mother, how she worked part-time jobs to support herself through school, and how she always believed that helping others mattered more than chasing money. The man listened with deep interest. "You remind me of how the world used to be," he said. "People cared more about one another. Nowadays, everyone's in such a hurry they forget what really matters." She smiled. "I guess I was in a hurry too until today." He laughed softly. "And yet you still stopped to help. That says a lot about who you are." For the first time since missing her flight, she felt comfort instead of regret. There was something calming about the old man's words, something that made her believe that maybe this delay wasn't such a bad thing after all. After a while, an announcement came over the speakers calling for boarding on another flight. The old man looked at his watch and said, "That's my flight." He stood up slowly, holding his small bag. The woman smiled and said, "It was nice talking with you." "I'm really glad you're okay." He smiled back, his eyes warm and kind. "You're a good soul," he said. "Don't ever stop being that way." "Thank you," she said softly. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I want you to remember something. Life has a way of rewarding people who do right when no one's watching. Sometimes the blessings just take a while to arrive." She nodded politely, not realizing how meaningful those words truly were. "I'll try to remember that," she said. He smiled again, then turned to leave. Before he walked away, he added, "You'll be all right. I can tell." As he disappeared into the crowd, she sat quietly for a moment, sipping her coffee. She thought about what he said. Something about his tone made her believe him. It was like he knew something she didn't. Hours later, when she finally boarded her new flight, she looked out the window and thought about how strange the day had been. She had missed an opportunity, but she had also gained something. An unexpected connection, a reminder that kindness still mattered. The next morning, she woke up to a new day, still thinking about the old man's words. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. The man she had helped wasn't just a tired traveler. Behind that gentle smile was someone powerful, someone who had noticed her pure heart and quiet strength. But for now, she had no idea who he really was. To her, he was just a kind old man who had shared a cup of coffee and a few comforting words. Yet somewhere across the country, that same man was thinking about her too. He hadn't forgotten the woman who helped him when no one else would. He was already planning something that would soon make her realize that missing her flight was never a loss. It was destiny quietly rearranging her path. At that airport cafe over 2 simple cups of coffee, a chain of events had begun that neither of them could see yet. She thought her day was over, but in truth, her real story had just begun. The next morning started quietly. The woman woke up feeling tired, her mind still heavy from the day before. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, half expecting a message from the company she had missed the interview with. But there was nothing. No missed calls, no new emails, just silence. She sighed and placed the phone on the table. It still felt unreal to her. All that preparation, all that hope, and in one moment everything had slipped away. She had replayed the whole thing in her mind 100 times. The sight of the old man struggling, her decision to help, and then the sound of the gate closing right in front of her. It still stung, but she kept telling herself she did the right thing. "It's okay," she whispered. "Maybe something better is waiting for me." She made herself a cup of tea and sat near the window, watching the morning sunlight creep through the curtains. The city was already alive outside, cars moving, people rushing to work. She wondered if anyone ever noticed how quickly life moved past them. Maybe that old man was right, she thought. Maybe people really did forget to care for one another. Around noon, she got a call. The number wasn't familiar, but she answered anyway. "Hello?" she said softly. "Good afternoon, ma'am," a polite voice replied. "This is from customer service at the airline you flew with yesterday. Are we speaking to the woman who missed her flight?" Her heart skipped. "Yes, that's me," she said quickly. "Ma'am, we want to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience you faced. We understand you missed your flight due to helping another passenger. Our records show that you informed our gate staff about it." She blinked in surprise. "Yes, that's right," she said slowly, unsure where this was going. "Well," the voice continued, "we would like to offer you something in return for your kindness. The airline's management has approved a complimentary first-class ticket to any destination of your choice. You can use it any time in the next year." She froze. I don't understand," she said. "Why would the airline do that?" "Someone from the higher management personally requested it," the caller explained. "They said you showed exceptional kindness and patience. You'll receive a confirmation email shortly." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A free first-class ticket? It felt too good to be real. She thanked the caller several times before hanging up. For a long moment, she just sat there holding the phone in disbelief. She opened her email, and there it was, a message from the airline, thanking her for her compassion and including a personalized note. The note read, "Kindness doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you for reminding us what humanity looks like in a busy world." She read the line again and again, smiling without realizing it. Her heart felt warm. Maybe that was her reward, not the job, but a sign that she had done something meaningful. Later that evening, just as she was beginning to feel a little lighter, her phone rang again. This time, the number looked completely different. When she answered, a woman's voice greeted her. "Hello, is this the same woman who was scheduled for an interview with our company yesterday?" Her breath caught. "Yes," she said quickly. "I tried to reach you yesterday. I missed my flight and I was hoping—" The woman interrupted kindly. "Yes, we received your message. But we wanted to let you know that our CEO personally asked to reschedule your interview." She blinked, speechless. "The CEO?" "Yes," the voice continued. "Apparently he heard about what happened at the airport. He said any person who would miss a flight to help a stranger is someone we should definitely meet." She sat back in her chair, stunned. She didn't know how to respond. That's unbelievable," she whispered. "The interview will take place tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., the woman said. "We'll send you all the details shortly. Congratulations and have a good evening." After the call ended, she put the phone down slowly. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't from sadness this time. She couldn't believe how everything had turned around so quickly. The same thing she thought had ruined her life had somehow become the reason everything was falling into place. She thought of the old man again, his gentle voice, his soft smile, and the way he said, "Kindness always finds its way back." She hadn't understood his words then, but now they made perfect sense. Maybe he was right all along. That night she barely slept. She kept thinking about the upcoming interview, about how strange life could be. She had no idea how the CEO of the company even found out about her story. Maybe one of the airline staff had told him, or maybe it was just fate weaving things together in its mysterious way. When morning came, she woke up early, dressed neatly, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her nerves were still there, but her heart felt calm. Something told her that this time things would go right. As she left her apartment and got into the cab, she felt a quiet confidence she hadn't felt before. The driver asked where she was headed, and she smiled. "To change my life," she said softly. When she reached the office building, she was guided to a meeting room on the top floor. Everything felt so professional. The polished floors, the glass walls, the city view outside. She sat waiting, her hands folded tightly in her lap. After a few minutes, the door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, followed by another familiar figure, the old man from the airport. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She almost stood up out of shock. The old man smiled gently at her, the same warm smile she remembered. "Good morning," he said kindly. Her voice trembled. You're here? How?" The tall man beside him smiled too. "Let me explain," he said. "This gentleman here is not just any passenger. He's the owner of the airline." She felt her heart skip a beat. "What?" she whispered, her hands covering her mouth. The old man chuckled softly. "I travel often without telling anyone who I am," he said. "It helps me see how people treat one another when they think no one important is watching." She couldn't find words. All she could do was stare, speechless and overwhelmed. He continued kindly, "You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything. Yet you stopped, you helped, and you showed real kindness in a world where people often rush past each other. That meant something to me." Tears filled her eyes. "I just did what anyone should do," she said quietly. The old man shook his head. "No, my dear, not everyone would have done what you did." He looked at the tall man beside him. "When I told my staff about her, I also called this company's CEO. I told him he needed to meet you." She was in complete shock. Everything suddenly made sense. The free ticket, the rescheduled interview, the personal note. It was all because of him. The old man smiled warmly. "You missed your flight, but you didn't lose anything. In fact, you gained something far greater. Sometimes the road that feels wrong leads you exactly where you're meant to be." She couldn't stop the tears anymore. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I don't even know how to thank you enough." The old man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Just keep being who you are," he said. "That's enough thanks for me." At that moment, the room felt quiet, like the world had paused. She realized that missing her flight wasn't a mistake. It was fate giving her a different route. A better one. When she left the building later that day, she looked up at the sky and smiled. The same planes she once watched leave without her were now flying above, but she didn't feel left behind anymore. She had learned something far more important than success, that kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back. And somewhere high above, on another plane heading to another city, the old man smiled too, knowing that he had just changed. Someone's life, not with money or power, but by recognizing a simple, genuine heart in a world that too often forgets to slow down and care. The woman walked out of the office building with her heart still racing. The air outside felt different, lighter, fresher, as if the whole world had changed in a single day. She stood on the sidewalk for a few moments, watching the traffic go by, trying to take it all in. Just yesterday, she had been sitting in her small apartment feeling hopeless, thinking her dream was gone forever. And now she had not only been offered another chance, but had met a man who completely changed how she looked at life. She took a slow breath, remembering his words. "Sometimes the road that feels wrong leads you exactly where you're meant to be." Those words echoed in her mind like a song she couldn't stop humming. She didn't just feel inspired. She felt alive. When she got home, she made herself a cup of tea and sat quietly for a long time. She looked around her small living room, the walls, the plants by the window, the books she had collected over the years. Everything felt new somehow, even though nothing had changed physically. It was her heart that had changed. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was chasing something that was always running away. Instead, she felt like life was finally walking beside her. Later that evening, her phone rang again. She saw the number and smiled immediately. It was from the company. She answered, her voice calm but excited. "Hello?" "Good evening," the caller said warmly. "We just wanted to inform you that the CEO was very impressed by your interview today. He's offering you the position, with a starting bonus and flexible work options. Congratulations." For a second, she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened and her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you so much." After the call ended, she sat there in silence, letting the news sink in. The job she thought she had lost forever was now hers. And not because she was lucky, but because she had done something good without expecting anything in return. It felt like life had been waiting to reward her all along, just in its own time. The next morning, she woke up early, feeling full of energy. She wanted to visit the airport again. Not to travel, but just to stand in the same place where everything had changed. When she arrived, the familiar sounds filled her ears. Rolling suitcases, flight announcements, people hugging and saying goodbye. She walked toward the waiting area where she had met the old man. As she stood there, she could almost see him again. Sitting quietly, struggling with his bag, smiling gently when she offered help. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering, "Thank you." Then she noticed a young woman nearby, struggling to manage her luggage and a baby stroller at the same time. Without thinking, she walked over and helped her lift the bag onto the conveyor. The woman thanked her gratefully. "You didn't have to," she said, smiling tiredly. The main character smiled back. "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes we just should." The young mother smiled wider, and in that moment it felt like everything had come full circle. She realized now that kindness wasn't something big or dramatic. It was a simple choice made quietly in ordinary moments. And those moments could change everything. A few days later, she received an email from the airline again. It wasn't a formal message this time. It was from the old man himself. The subject line simply read, "Keep flying high." In the message, he wrote, "You remind me of a younger version of myself. I once missed many things in life because I was always in a hurry. You reminded me what really matters. I hope you never stop being the person you are. The world needs more people like you." She smiled as she read it, her heart swelling with warmth. She replied simply, "Thank you for reminding me that doing the right thing is never wasted time." Months passed and her life slowly settled into a beautiful rhythm. Her new job turned out to be everything she had hoped for and more. Her coworkers admired her calm attitude, her patience, and the quiet confidence she carried. They didn't know the full story behind her smile, but they could feel that she had been through something special. One afternoon, during a company meeting, the CEO mentioned an upcoming corporate travel partnership with a major airline. When the presentation slide changed, her eyes widened. The logo on the screen was the same airline owned by the old man. The CEO smiled at her across the table. "I think you'll be happy to hear this," he said. "Our new collaboration was inspired by a story we heard not too long ago, about someone who helped a stranger and changed both their lives." The whole room clapped. Not knowing she was the person behind that story, she felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't say a word. She just smiled quietly, grateful for how life had come together in ways she could never have planned. That night, she returned home and sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. It was the same view she used to stare at when she felt lost, but now it looked completely different. The lights didn't seem distant anymore. They seemed alive, warm, and welcoming. Her phone buzzed with another message, this time from a young intern at her office. The message read, "Thank you for helping me with my presentation today. I was really nervous, but you made me feel confident." She smiled as she read it, realizing that the cycle of kindness was still going. Just as the old man's kindness had changed her, her own actions were now changing others. And that was the most beautiful part of it all. How one simple act could ripple through so many lives, quietly but powerfully. A few weeks later, She finally decided to use the free first-class ticket she had been gifted. She chose a destination she'd always dreamed of visiting, a quiet island with clear blue water and peaceful sunsets. When she boarded the plane, she couldn't help but smile as the flight attendants greeted her kindly. She settled into her seat and looked out the window as the plane began to move. As they took off, she thought back to that day when she had missed her flight, how broken she had felt, how hopeless it seemed. Now she was flying not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She realized that sometimes missing one flight can lead you to a much better journey. As the plane rose higher, she whispered to herself, everything happens for a reason. And this time, she truly believed it. When the plane reached cruising height, a flight attendant approached her and handed her a small envelope. "This is for you, ma'am," she said with a smile. She looked confused. "For me?" "Yes," the attendant said. "It was left here with your ticket with a note saying, 'She'll know who it's from.'" Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note. "I hope this journey reminds you that every flight you take now is yours, by choice, by courage, and by kindness." An old friend. Her eyes filled with tears again and she pressed the note to her chest. She didn't know where he was, but she hoped he was happy, knowing how much his kindness had done for her. As the sun began to set outside the airplane window, she looked at the glowing sky and smiled. The clouds looked like soft waves of gold and pink, stretching endlessly ahead. In that quiet moment, she felt a deep peace she had never known before. She realized then that life wasn't about rushing or chasing success. It was about people, the ones we help, the ones who help us, and the small moments that tie us all together. And somewhere, maybe on another flight or in another city, the old man was probably smiling too, knowing that his small moment of struggle had led to something far greater than he could have imagined. For her, it wasn't just about missing a flight anymore. It was about finding a purpose, discovering kindness, and learning that sometimes the best journeys begin exactly when you think your plans have fallen apart. As the plane glided through the clouds, she closed her eyes and whispered with a gentle smile, "Thank you for making me miss that flight."